If you watch any motorcycle skills channel, you'll hear these words repeated in one form or another. You have to practice. You need to work on your skills. If you aren't developing your skills, you're losing them, and on and on. Well, it dawned on me the other day that we spend a lot of time telling riders to develop their skills and not much time telling them how to practice, what to work on, and how to find the best place to practice. This week, let's take a very practical approach and we'll discuss these things. At the end of the video, I'll have a list of riding skills to master and several videos that will help you master these techniques. So stay tuned till the end and we'll give you some practical things to work on. So when it comes to riding a motorcycle well, it's important to know what your goal for riding is. Do you want to master riding off-road on a big BMW GS down some tight single back road trails? Do you want to hop on a sports bike and drag your knees around the corner and reduce your lap times out on the track? Or do you want to be a better street rider and go on tours or commute safely to and from work? Do you want other traffic on the road to have less impact on your ability to ride safely? Well, the answer to these questions will help determine what type of training you should be doing. But also, let me say this, there is some bleed over from one riding discipline to the next. They're not all completely exclusive, so taking the track day can have huge benefits for the street rider who wants to corner better, even though you might not corner on the street to the extreme that you would out on the track. So each training type is not exclusive to that discipline. Some is just more relevant than others to what type of riding that you want to do. The focus of MCrider is always on street riding. If you want to ride better on the street, have more control over your motorcycle, use strategies so that the traffic out on the street will have less impact on your ability to ride safely, well, you're in the right place because that's what we do here on MCrider. We focus on street riding. So what skills does a street rider need to practice? What are some tips to finding the best place to practice, and how should these practice sessions be set up? Well, first, let's look at some tips on finding the right place to practice. Now, depending on where you live, this may be more tricky for some than others, but here's some places that I've used in the past that have worked well for me and give me a place to work on my riding skills. School parking lots is a big one. When school's not in session, obviously, so on the weekends or after school lets out, well after the parking lot has cleared, high schools seem to be better than elementary or middle schools because they typically have more parking. High school stadiums is another good place. It's one of the best options if they keep the lot open. Now, there are a few around here in Dallas-Fort Worth area where they'll put gates up and you don't want to ride around gates or something like that. But if the parking lot is open to the public, that's a good place to look at. Church parking lots often work well. Stores or shopping areas that are no longer in business work really well. And usually a large shopping mall will have a corner of the parking lot, helped by a department store that doesn't get a whole lot of traffic or customers. There usually will be a secluded area of that parking lot that you can go to. The important thing to remember is to find the section of the lot that's out of the way. You're not out there burning rubber, you're not marking up the pavement, you're not being a nuisance to others. And if you feel more comfortable doing so, like on a church parking lot, go in and ask for permission and make sure you explain what you're doing. If you're out on a lot and you're asked to leave, try to explain the situation, and if they still don't want you there, then leave. Find another parking lot to practice on. With all of that said, though, in all of my practice sessions over the years, I've only had one security guard approach me and ask me what I was doing. When I explained, he said, okay, and he sat over in the corner of the lot and he watched me for a while. He eventually came back over and asked me where he could learn to ride a motorcycle and get his motorcycle license. So hopefully I created another rider out of that session. The bottom line is it should be a parking lot that's out of the way. You shouldn't be disturbing anyone else. And if you're having to dodge cars, so cars are constantly riding through your practice session, or you're on the lookout for cars, it's probably not the right lot to be practicing on. You want something that's out of the way. Another good option if you're looking for areas to practice is just open up Google Maps and get on satellite view and have a look around your area. You can at least get an idea and find some large parking lots that are worth taking a ride out and looking at in person and see if they will work. So how much work does it take to set up a parking lot to practice on? Well, most of the time, zero for me, because I use the lines of the parking spaces as a guide. So if you've got a parking lot that's got, parking spaces, those are ideal, and you often don't have to set up anything in those lots in order to practice on it. So most parking spaces, you want one, if you can find it, where they're squared off, not where they're angled in. If the parking spaces are angled in, that makes it a little more difficult to use the lines. But if they're squared off so that the cars pull in straight rather than an angle, those work a whole lot better. So most parking spaces are 9 feet wide and 18 feet long. With those dimensions alone, you can practice U-turns in 2 or 3 parking spaces, depending on your skill level. You can practice turns from a stop and using that to set up the painted line on the other side of the parking space as a barrier to turn before. And you can approach a parking space and begin your emergency braking. So if you start at one line and you begin your braking there, you're 9 feet out to the next spot, so you can use that as a guide and figure out how long it's taking you to get the motorcycle to a stop. If you want to set up more detailed exercises, you can carry a few cones around, like this. I've got these cones here that I often carry with me on the motorcycle. If you don't have cones, you can buy a set of these at mcrider.com/cone. They easily fit in a saddlebag or your backpack, and you can toss these out, and you can set up all kinds of exercises, even if the lot doesn't have painted lines on it. Now, small cones like this are great to have. They can be set up quickly to mark out exercises and then removed. You just pick them back up and you've not marked up the parking lot and nobody knows you were even there. So you found the lot, you've got your cones or you've got painted lines to use as markings. What kinds of things should you be working on when you practice? Well, I like to think of these skills as the big 5 when it comes to practicing on a motorcycle. There are a lot of skills that are important, but I think these should be at the top of your practice list. So emergency stops, swerving, turns from a stop, cornering, and U-turns. So those first 2 skills listed here, emergency stops and swerving, are 2 critical accident avoidance skills. When you're out on the street and that car pulls out in front of you or there's debris in the roadway, you want to be efficient at emergency braking and swerving, so you want to make sure that these are at the top of your practice list. And when you're out on the street, it's one or the other depending on the situation. So you're either emergency braking or you're swerving to get around the obstacle. You want to make sure you're not combining the 2 because that's a quick way to drop your motorcycle. Another one to work on frequently is turning from a stop, and that's something that challenges new riders and experienced riders alike. You want to practice this so you come to a complete stop and then you want to make a sharp right or left-hand turn from that stop. You want to practice this so that pulling out from a stop sign or a red light, you don't allow the power of the motorcycle to push you out wide in that curve or that turn and force you into oncoming traffic. So depending on whether you're in the U.S., making right-hand turns or European riders making left-hand turns, you want to practice those skills so that the motorcycle's not pushing you out into oncoming traffic when you make that turn from a stop. Cornering's an important skill to practice. When you're practicing cornering on a parking lot, get a good feel for using counter steering. So push on that left handlebar, get the motorcycle to go to the left, push right to go right. So you really want to focus and concentrate on that counter steering so that when you're out on the street and you need to tighten up your turn, your natural instinct is just to push a little bit harder to get the motorcycle to lean more and turn sharper. So make some sweeping turns on the parking lot and focus on the act of counter steering. As you're doing that, work on your head turns and look through the corner. So this can't be emphasized enough to look further through the corner than what feels natural. So I'm making that left-hand turn. Most riders will turn, their head something like this when they probably should be turning their head more like that. Make sure your eyes are looking where you want the motorcycle to be, not where it's going. So what do I mean by that? So if I'm making a left-hand turn, you know, the motorcycle's going here. It's kind of pointed in that direction, but I want the motorcycle to be over here. So I'm going to turn my head and eyes. I'm going to point my nose in the direction I want the motorcycle to go. And this is a bad habit of most riders. They're not turning their head enough. So practice in that parking lot, turning your head further than what feels natural. And then after a while, you'll start developing a good head turn, and it will become more natural when you're out riding on the street. So a lot of people ask about U-turns and why practicing U-turns are important, because a U-turn has rarely saved a life out on the street, so why practice them? Well, because U-turns, if done correctly, bring together a lot of different riding disciplines. They force you to look through that corner. They force you to get the clutch in the friction zone. You're using body position, so you're counterweighting on the motorcycle, and you're developing general motorcycle control. If you show me a rider who's proficient at riding a motorcycle at slow speeds, I'll have a much greater confidence in that rider's ability to handle the motorcycle at road speed. So go to mcrider.com/skills, and I'm going to forward you to a YouTube playlist where you can practice the big 5, the things that we've talked about in this video. I've got videos that show you how to work on those techniques, how to practice them on the parking lot, and some practical tips to develop those skills. So go to mcrider.com/skills, and I'll forward you on to that YouTube playlist where you can begin developing these skills. Hopefully you can find that parking lot. You know how to set it up using the lines to practice on. Another great option is the MCrider field guide. It's got all of these exercises laid out for you with diagrams of how to set it up, coaching tips, problem corrections, and videos to demonstrate the technique. So members get access to the field guide. You can find that at mcrider.com/member, all the details on becoming a member, or go to mcrider.com/skills, and I'll just forward you to the YouTube playlist and show you the videos that will help you develop these skills. So leave a comment below. I'd love to hear from you guys, the things that you're working on, or maybe some tips or ideas on parking lots that you found that have worked well for you. And until next week, guys, it's Kevin with MCrider, and I'll see you on the road.